There's a gentle wind tonight. It brushes softly through a pine forest that no longer exists. Where once a Roman soldier sat carving letters into the smooth bark of a tree that stood beside a road ancient, even in his time. That tree is gone now. Of course, the road, too, swallowed by centuries in soil. But the name he carved the still survive on a scrap of rot-soft wood unearthed during the wet spring of 1842. Lucella, why? A ghost in the memory of one man. Long gone. This is how history moves, not in loud declarations or sudden wars, but in quiet moments. A name whispered, a shoe dropped behind a wall, a child falling asleep on a ship bound for a new world. Tonight, we walk alongside those forgotten people. Let us begin somewhere small. A garden in medieval Yorkshire, its soil packed with crushed oyster shells and soot. A woman kneels humming a song no one will ever write down, planting onions that will feed her family if the frost is late and the rats are merciful. She's not important not to kings or at cards, but her hands are calloused and her story matters. Did she dream of a different life? Did she ever leave the village? Or was her greatest journey simply standing at the edge of the river one spring morning, watching a trader pass with oranges so bright they looked like bottled sun? We'll never know her name, but tonight you can hear her song in the back of your mind, soft, steady, turning earth into survival. Elsewhere, time ticks forward. In a stone chamber near the coast of Ireland, a monk copies the Psalms by candlelight. He is tired. His fingers ache. The ink has thickened with the cold. But he continues, letter by letter, not because of faith though he has it, but because the rhythm of the work quiets his thought. Each stroke, a lullaby for his mind. He pauses to sip bitter ale, brewed by the older monks. Outside, a fox cries in the darkness. Somewhere deep in the folds of the vellum, he's hidden a doodle, a rabbit, playing a harp. No one will find it for 800 years. When they do, they'll smile, puzzled. And for a moment, the monk will live again. In laughter a page turns. In the sands of Cairo, two merchants argue beneath a swaying awning. The day is hard. The spice jaws sweat. A boy listens from the shadows, absorbing every price, every pause, every flicker of deception. That boy will grow old rich, but tonight he is small and hungry, fascinated by how quickly power changes hands. Down the road, a potter sings as he throws clay. His wheel turns like time itself. He doesn't hear the merchant. He is dreaming of a glaze that mimics the sky after rain. Each piece he fires carries a different story. One will be found intact in a sunken ship 1,000 years later. Scientists will marvel at the color, unaware that it came from a mistake. Too much ash, not enough cobalt. Beauty born of error. The wind shifts again. Now we are in Kyoto. Lanterns float on a river. A girl in a blue robe watches them pass. She is too young to understand grief, but she feels its shape in her chest as she releases her paper light, made for a grandmother who died before she could remember her. The lantern drifts, then falters, then Later that night, she will eat pickled plums and sleep beside her mother, and in dreams her grandmother will comb her hair with moonlit fingers. History is not dates, it is moments. And moments like these belong to all of us. So rest here. The path ahead is long, but not hurry. Tonight, we will walk softly. A snow is falling. Slow, slow, soft, barely there. It's 1624, and a boy is walking through the outskirts of Prague with a piece of bread wrapped in wool cloth tucked deep in his coat. The crust is still warm, a gift from the baker's daughter who always slips him a slice when her father isn't looking. He doesn't know it, but that simple piece of bread brown just enough, its smell mingling with the wood smoke from 1,000 chimneys will be the best thing he ever eats. Not because it's special, but because he's 13 and cold, and the world hasn't yet become too heavy to carry. He walks, and the snow thickens. His boots squeak. The bread disappears in 3 bites, and he wipes his fingers on the hem of his sleeve. The cold doesn't bite so hard now, and for a while nothing matters but walking forward. And we follow him not to any grand event, not to any disaster or coronation, but simply because he existed. And that is enough. Just beyond the boy's snowy path, centuries away, we find ourselves in a different season, in a different kind of silence. We're in a sun-bleached villa in southern Rome. The year is 67 CE. A widow waters a lemon tree in a clay pot. It's her late husband's tree. He planted it before he left for the war in Judea, never returned, and now it blooms for no one but her. She hums as she waters. The breeze plays with the hem of her robe. Her cat, ancient and indifferent, stretches in a sunbeam nearby. Her neighbors call her the lemon ghost, not because she is strange, but because she never speaks in public. She smiles, nods, listens, but never a word. Some say it's grief. Others say she simply prefers the company of silence. But in her courtyard, under the scent of lemons, the air is thick with memory and stillness and something tender. And still, time turns. We now drift to a tavern in northern France, near the edge of the forest of... It's a cold, drizzly evening in 1391. Inside, the fire crackles. A man with a crooked nose is telling a story too loudly. A girl who's too young to be working this late is clearing mugs. A knight who hasn't fought in years stares into his stew, like it might tell him a secret. In the corner, a woman hums as she sews. She's not part of the tavern, she's just always there. No one knows her name, but she listens to every story, every argument, every lie told over bread and beer. One day, she stitched a tapestry, not of battles or saints, but of these small things. The way the crooked man's voice cracked when he mentioned his daughter, or how the girl slipped a coin into the beggar's coat when no one was watching. The tapestry will hang in a small church for centuries. People will admire its craftsmanship, not knowing what it really holds, because memory hides in places too quiet to notice. And so we continue. Now we're in a desert caravan. The year 984. The sand is fine as flour, blowing in little swirls across the dunes. A boy of 12 carries a small pouch of dates and salted almonds. He rides beside his uncle, a trader who tells long stories about markets and monsters. They are headed to Samarkand. The road will take weeks, maybe months, but the boy isn't afraid. His favorite part of the journey is the silence between the stories. At night, they sleep under heavy blankets. The stars are red. The boy cannot sleep, so he counts the constellations. Names them things no one's ever called them. A lion's tooth, the mother's scar, the dancing jar. No one will ever hear these names again. But for one night, they lived. And that is enough. Now the caravan fades, and we move north to a lonely cabin in Finland, where a grandmother braids the hair of a child with frostbitten toes. It's the 1100s. Outside, the wolves. Up inside, she sings an old story, passed down by voice alone, no books, no ink, no scribe. It is about a girl who swallowed the northern lights and glowed so brightly that the bears mistook her for the moon. The child doesn't understand it all, but he remembers the way her voice rises and falls like waves in a lake. Years later, he will carve that story into wood. Not well, but with love, and it will be found. Scorched by fire, but legible. Love leaves traces, even when nothing else remains. And now, let us walk softly to the banks of the Nile, to the city of Thebes. It's sunrise in the year 1200 BCE. The air smells of fish and mud, linen and myrrh. A scribe dips his reed pen into ink made from crushed insects. He writes a letter not for the pharaoh, but for his cousin, who has moved away to the edge of the delta. He writes about the river levels about his surf, about a girl he saw yesterday buying fish. He wonders if she'll be at the festival. He ends the letter with a joke that no longer makes sense, but the laughter is still there, etched into the grooves of his words. That letter will survive, folded into a basket, lost in sand, found 3,000 years later by a man with gloves and tweezers. He won't understand the joke, but he'll smile anyway, because even then, we were laughing. Even then, we were trying to stay human. Even then, someone was always writing to someone else, just in case it mattered. And so it goes. Let the names fade. Let the kings pause. Tonight, we walk with the ones who cooked, who mended, who waited, the ones who whispered lullabies that would never be written down, the ones who loved without being remembered. And now, listener, perhaps you feel it too. Not just the weight of time, but its softness, its breath, its hush. The stories are still coming. The hours are long, but you are safe. So breathe and let the night hold you. There is a clay cup buried beneath what was once a village in the hills of Anatolia. You would not notice it if you walked by. You'd step over it or on it, but it holds fingerprints, real ones, pressed into its rim by a child who wasn't supposed to touch it. The print is shallow, smudged, but it's there. Thousands of years later, a scholar will run her thumb along that print and feel what? Exact, not history, not archaeology, but closeness. Proof that someone small once broke the rules and didn't wash their hands. And somehow, that print survived every storm, every flame, every shift in plate of earth. Sometimes, that's all it takes to bring someone back. A mistake in the mud. Now the mud melts into dust, and we move westward. It's spring in ancient Athens. The market is loud, crowded, full of words. But one girl slips quietly through the stalls, collecting scraps bits of wool, broken beads, a single goose feather. Her mother will ask what she's doing. She won't have a good answer. She shrugged, smiled, and lied for a doll. But the truth is, she's making something sacred. She's building a shrine, not for a god, not really, but for a dream she had 3 nights ago, of a mountain she's never seen, of a voice that called her by a name she didn't know was hers. She doesn't tell anyone about the shrine. She hides it beneath a loose tile in the floor. Each night, she adds something new, a pebble, a scrap of linen dyed blue. No one ever finds it, but the tile stays warm for months. Now the markets vanish. Now the stones glow red. We're in a city carved from cliffs Petra. Traders pass, tired and sunburned. They unload silk, incense, metals. One of them, a man from a place that doesn't exist anymore, sits outside a cave and hums a song in a language no one else there speaks, not even him. He doesn't know what the words mean. He learned them from his mother, who learned them from hers. They might be nonsense, but the melody is comforting. So he hums, and others listen. And for a while, no one is selling anything. They're just breathing in time. That song, in some way, still echoes, not in the melody, but in the feeling you get when you hear someone sing to themselves without realizing it, soft, unmeasured, safe. Now that hum becomes wave. We're on the deck of a Norse ship. The sea is steel gray. The sails creak. A man carves a small fish from a block of driftwood, his thumb pressing slow grooves into the belly. He's not a warrior, not a raider. He's a cook, and he's carving it for his daughter back home. She likes fish, and he's been away too long. He keeps the fish in his pocket. When he lands, he'll give it to her. But the voyage takes too long. A storm hits. The ship splinters. The fish sinks. 1,000 years later, a diver finds it tangled in coral. She brushes the salt away, holds it in her palm, and wonders if it was made by a god. It was not. It was made by love. History hides in small things. And now we follow a candle flame down a corridor in a castle in Bohemia. A servant girl is carrying a tray of wine and bread to a guest whose name she is not allowed to say. She balances carefully, steps lightly, and whispers a rhyme to herself under her breath. One, her grandmother taught her, about wolves who live in mirrors and only appear if you forget to say thank you. She says it to keep the wolves away. Just in case. The guest takes the tray without a word, doesn't look at her, doesn't say thank you. That night, the mirror in his chamber cracks. Of course, it was just the cold, or maybe the way the window rattles, or maybe not the rhyme survives. Not in books, but in bedtime whispers pass down through kitchen halls. A warning, a comfort, a spell, and now the wind shifts once more to China. The year is lost somewhere between dynasties. In a village no one mapped. An old man writes poems in the dust with a stick. He erases each one as he finishes. He never recites them aloud. He never keeps them. He says the earth doesn't like being written on too long. But one day, a boy memorizes one of the poems, writes it down in ink, in secret. Centuries later, that scrap is found inside a folded fan in a Kyoto market. It reads, "The river forgets its name, but still it flows. So to do I, it's unsigned, but it carries the silence of someone who had nothing to prove." And so we drift again. A baker in Seville, a teacher in Alexandria, a midwife in Tallinn, a prisoner carving names into a beam above his head, not his own, but those he's loved. A runaway girl watching the stars from a rooftop, trying to pick one to name herself after. None of them make it into textbooks, but they shaped the world more than the ones who did. And now, your own breath has slowed. You've drifted into their rhythm, the rhythm of roads walked in silence, of bread broken between friends, of letters never sent. You are not alone here. The past is not behind you, it's beneath you. Like roots in the dark, like a heartbeat in the floorboards. So let it hold you. There are still more stories, still more hours to drift, but for now, just live. Somewhere in the marshlands of old Flanders, in a cottage stitched together from wattle and thatch, a man is talking to his dog. It's not remarkable. He talks to the dog every day about the weather, about the odd-colored turnip he pulled from the soil that morning, about how the fish aren't biting the way they used to. The dog never answers, but it listens faithfully, head tilted, eyes blinking slowly. That dog is the man's only family. His wife passed 3 winters ago, and the children are grown and far away. The cottage creaks in the wind, and the stove smokes if he doesn't tap it just right. But each morning, he boils water, lays out a crust of bread for himself, and a slightly bigger one for the dog. He calls it fairness. One day, a traveling monk stops by to ask for water. The man gives him a full pot and half his bread. The monk offers a blessing, but the man waves him off. "I've got company already," he says, patting the dog's ears. When the man dies, they find his will written on the back of an old almanac. He leaves everything to the dog, and scrawled in the margin is a note. "Thank you for listening, even when I made no sense." History, too, listens, even when no one else does. Now we drift toward a tiny island monastery off the coast of Iona, where seabirds scream into the wind and the stones stay slick with salt all year long. It's the year 805. A scribe is working by candlelight, copying a psalm for the 5th time because his pen keeps splitting. The ink is thin, stretched with water to last longer. He sighs, his fingers ache, but he continues. Outside, a storm is brewing. Waves slap the rocks, and wind tears at the chapel roof. The other monks are praying, but the scribe stays at his desk, scratching slowly, steadily, as if each letter wards off the dark. And then, a moment of beauty. The candle flickers and steadies. The ink flows just right. The line of the psalm completes with a flourish that even he didn't plan. He leans back just for a second and smiles. That page will survive. The rest of the book will burn in a Viking rain. But that page, just one, will wash up on a shore miles away. A fisherman's daughter will find it and fold it into the hem of her wedding dress because she likes the way the letters look. She never know what they mean, but you say it felt like it was meant for her. Sometimes what survives is not what was meant to, but what was loved. Now let's slip into a market square in Damascus. The sun is low. A boy chases a hoop of iron down a dusty lane, shouting with laughter. A woman sells perfume from glass bottles shaped like pomegranates. A man plays a flute with only one hand. And beneath it all, the steady murmur of trade spices, fabrics, stories. A Trefalo, too tired to bargain, rests on the stone step of a fountain. He doesn't understand the language, but the rhythm comforts him. He pulls out a piece of paper and begins sketching out the buildings. But the sounds, lines for voices, curves for laughter, dots for footsteps, that sketch, folded and forgotten in his satchel, will become the basis for a musical composition centuries later. The composer won't know where the shapes came from, only that they feel like something true. And maybe that's all history is, something true, wrapped in a moment, carried forward by people who forget where they found it. Now it is evening in the Mongolian steppe. A girl watches the stars rise over the plain. She knows the constellations by name her grandmother taught her, and she sings to them quietly. A lullaby meant not for babies, but for the wind. Her father is away with the horse. Her mother is sleeping. The fire is low, but she is not afraid. She has tied bits of cloth to a branch to honor the spirit. She believes with all her heart that someone is listening. Centuries later, an explorer will stumble across that branch faded, wind-beaten, still upright. He'll think it's a weather marker. He'll never know it was a prayer. But the spirits do. And perhaps that's enough. Let us now drift south into the olive groves of ancient Iberia. A boy is sent out with a goat, told not to return until sunset. He walks and walks, then lies down beneath a fig tree. He doesn't nap. He just watches the branches sway. Time passes. Ants crawl over his boot. The goat chews at the grass indifferent. The boy hums, then stops, then hums again, trying different sounds. He doesn't know it, but he's inventing a melody that no one else has ever made. It won't be written down. It won't be remembered. But for an afternoon it exists, pure and perfect. He'll forget it by nightfall. But the fig tree will remember. Everything remembers in its own way. Now we drift once more to a bedroom in a stone house in Bruges. A girl is ill. Her fever has broken, but her dreams still dance like fireflies. Her sister sits beside her, whispering old stories half remembered, half invented, about a sailor who married a cloud, about a door that led to the moon, about a secret buried in the folds of her blanket. She doesn't know if her sister can hear, but she keeps telling them anyway. Those stories will never be published. They will die in that room, and yet they will echo in the way the girl breathes, in the way her eyes flutter open, just once, and close again with a sigh that says, I hear you. Let's pause there for just a moment. Let the air be still. Let the story settle. You too are part of this thread. Your breath joins the winds that once carried these voices. Your heartbeat echoes footsteps from 1,000 years ago. There's no rush. We have all night, and there are still more places to go. In the green folds of the Carpathian Mountains, mist hangs low across the morning pines. A shepherd leans on his crook, eyes half closed, listening not for wolves or weather, but for a sound he knows will never come again. Years ago, when he was a boy, his grandmother would sing as she spun wool songs older than the language they now speak. One in particular, about a river that once carried dreams downstream to the sea, used to lull him to sleep. She died one winter without warning, and though he's tried, the tune eludes him. Slippery, faint, he hums what he can remember. It's not quite right. But he sings it anyway. For the sheep, for the tree, for the wind that brushes the cliffs like a mother's hand. No one will ever record it, but perhaps the mountains remember. Now we walk east to Delhi where, in a sunlit alley painted in blues and yellows, a blind potter molds clay. His hands are his eyes, every ridge, every curve, a sentence, every imperfection a word. People come from far villages to buy his cups not because they are perfect, but because they feel alive. One day, a child asks how he knows when the pot is done. The man smiles. When it breathes, he says. A poet hears this and writes it down. Centuries later, it becomes a proverb. No one remembers the potter's name, but his wisdom outlives every pot he ever shaped. Now let us follow a song. One simple lullaby. Born in a Baltic fishing village, it begins with a grandmother humming to a baby beneath a sky lined with gulls. It is passed from her to a daughter, from the daughter to a son. Each adds a verse. Each changes a word. By the time it reaches the great-grandchild, it is a different song entirely, but the melody, that original shape, remains. When that great-grandchild flees a war and finds refuge in another land, he sings a tune to a new child, born far from that coastal village. The lullaby now has no known words, just soft hums. The child falls asleep to it, night after night. One day, they'll hum it to someone else, and it will travel on. A thread that never frays, a note that never fades. Now the hum becomes waves again. We are at the edge of the world, or at least what medieval sailors thought was the edge. A lighthouse burns atop a cliff. A woman lights the lantern. Every night, every single night. She doesn't wait for thanks. She doesn't look out to sea. She simply lights the lamp and walks back inside. Her father did it before her. His mother before him. A chain of light, unbroken. One winter, no ships passed. A storm rages for a week. Ice forms on the rock. Still, she lights the flame. And in the storm's final hour, one boat, broken and half sunk, sees that tiny flicker and turns just in time. No one ever meets the woman. No one ever sends word. But the story spreads, and sailors begin leaving small tokens at the base of the cliff. Knots of ribbon, bits of driftwood with carvings. By the time she dies, the base of the lighthouse is a shrine to her, to the light, to the act of doing something kind even when no one is watching. That is how peace is built, quietly, repeatedly. Now, let's travel to a market in 10th centuries. A weaver unrolls a bolt of fabric dyed the color of bruised lilacs. A merchant runs his fingers across it, then stops. Embedded in the pattern, almost too faint to notice, are words not written in it, but woven into the threads themselves. Poetry, a full stanza, a lament for a lost city swallowed by sand. The merchant buys the cloth, but not for profit. He pins it to the wall of his shop. Customers ask what the words mean. He shrugs. Not sure, he says. But I like how they feel. Some stories are not understood, they are simply felt. Now let us move underground to a wine cellar in Vienna, where a boy is sweeping in silence. He's not allowed to speak during his work, but when he's alone, he talks to the barrel. He names them, tells them stories. One is called Lucas and always complains. Another, Claire, is noble and kind. The smallest, near the corner, is shy. It never says anything. But the boy thinks it listens better than the rest. One day, he leaves the city, grows up, forgets about the cellar. But late in life, he hears someone laugh in just the way Lucas used to. And for a moment, he remembers every barrow. He tells his daughter the stories. She writes them down. Years later, someone finds them and publishes them under the title, The Talking Casks of Vienna. They are considered fiction, but you and I know better. Now, the soft scratching of quill on parchment. In a candlelit hall in Bologna, a woman copies a medical text. Her Latin is short, Her handwriting is fine, but it's the margin notes that tell the truth. Next to the list of herbs to soothe fever, she scribbled, also works for heartbreak. Sometimes, beside a diagram of the human skull, she's drawn a tiny flower. On the back page, in the crease, she's written, "The man I love does not know I exist, but at least I know how to fix a broken leg." That book is stored for centuries, forgotten. When it's found again, scholars debate the authorship of the notes, but someone, somewhere, reads them alone and smiles not because they're useful, but because they're human. And now we return to you. You who have traveled through time tonight, not by force, but by gentle drift. You whose heartbeat has matched the rhythm of forgotten footsteps. You who now know that the softest parts of history are often the most true. So rest here if you wish, or walk a little further. There are more voices ahead, more quiet rooms, more echoes tucked in corners, waiting patiently for someone to listen. And you are listening? That is enough! There is a street inn where the stones remember laughter. Not the grand kind, not the roars of feasts or parades. No, this was softer. The laughter of two boys, maybe 12 or 30, running through the alley with orange peels stuck between their teeth like tusks. They barked, howled, pretended to be lions. One of them would grow up to teach astronomy. The other would become a stonecutter. They'd lose touch. The years would fill with children, taxes, illness, politics, but neither would forget that afternoon where time stood still and the only sound was joy bouncing between the buildings. Centuries later, archaeologists uncover fragments of broken pottery at that corner. They label the site, photograph it, catalog it. But the laughter that drifts, invisible, through the air, even now, whenever someone walks slowly enough to hear it. Now, a garden in Kyoto. It is autumn. A woman in her 90s gently rakes a circle into the gravel, her hands as steady as river stones. Every morning she rearranges the line, not to change anything but to keep balance. She's been doing this since her husband passed, decades ago. The first year, she raked furiously, grieved in every stroke. The second, slower. The third, softer. Now, the rake moves like breath. Visitors come. They think it's a formal garden. They take photos. They speak in whispers. But they don't know the story. That each swirl represents a memory. That one smooth arc near the center is the shape her husband S-back made. When he leaned over to tie his sandals, she rakes it every morning. That memory, that curve. When she is gone, no one will know what it meant, but the gravel will remember. It always does. Now we slip into the edges of Istanbul. A spice shop, small, cluttered, run by a man with too much beard and too little interest in profit. He doesn't advertise, doesn't modernize. But if you mention a scent from your childhood or steward, a smoke from the neighbor's window, he will disappear behind a curtain and return with a jar that smells exactly like it. People say he has thousands. Others say he's a fraud, but he never explains. Just smiles, hands you the jar, and waits. Once, a young woman came in and said she wanted to remember the smell of her grandmother's scarf. He blinked, nodded, then gave her a vial filled with crushed dried rose, soap leaf, and something else sun-eyed. He didn't charge her. Some memories are too important for coin. Now we step inside a ship of trading vessels somewhere near what would become Portugal. It's 1410. The sea is mild. A sailor leans against a barrel and sketches ships on a scrap of cloth with a charcoal nub. He's illiterate, can't write a word, but his drawings are meticulous sails, ropes, wheels, maps. He gives them to no one. They're not for glory. They're just how he understands the world. One of the claws survives stuck into a crack in the ship's timbers. When the wreck is found, 500 years later, historians mistake it for a child's work. But an artist sees it and weeps, because the proportions are perfect, because the lines are true, because someone saw the world with care and no one ever knew until now. Now let us enter a forest in Bavaria, deep where the moss grows thick and the sun forgets to rise all the way. There, a boy once carved notches into a tree one for every day. His brother was away at war. The tree still stands, gnarled and old, but if you run your fingers along the bark, you'll feel them. Each one a prayer, unspoken but carved in hope. His brother returned. They embraced beneath that tree. Neither of them spoke of the night, but every spring after that, they brought a pitcher of beer and sat in the moss. No words, just silence and the creak of the old tree in the breeze. Sometimes love needs no language. Now, a pause, a breath. We're in Cairo in the year 1811. A girl waits at the window, brushing her hair with deliberate slowness. Her father has gone to market. Her brothers play in the courtyard. But she waits, as she always does, for a single moment when the light hits the window, lattice just so. In that moment, tiny flecks of gold dance across her hands. The dust glows. Her palms shimmer. She imagines it as magic. Years later, she will tell her grandchildren that the sun once spoke to her. They'll laugh, roll their eyes. But when they are older and light catches in unexpected places, they will remember not the story, but the feeling. A stillness wrapped in gold. And now, winter. In Novgorod, a boy learns to make ink from soot and honey. His teacher is old, stern, always frowning. But the boy is patient. His first letter is crooked. His second is worse. But by the 50th, he finds a rhythm. When he writes the name of his friend to go who gave him a red string on the first frost, he gets the loops just right. He never tells her, but he keeps that scrap of paper for years. It survives a fire, a flood, even war. It is found one day, sewn into the lining of a coat, discovered in an attic. No one can read it. The language is lost, but someone who holds it says, "This feels like love," and they are right. Now the snow melts, and the stars return. We are drifting once more, gently, endlessly through lives that never made the maps, through hands that never wrote the laws, through hearts that beat quietly while the world marched on. You are one of them. Now, part of this soft web of memory and moment. So, close your eyes if you haven't yet. Let your breath join the wind. Let your dreams fill with all the small, forgotten stories that once lit the world like fireflies. And know this, the quiet ones were never truly lost. They've just been waiting for someone like you, someone willing to listen